Good afternoon and good day to you all, and thank you for joining us on day 2 of our Power and Mining Digital Dialogue series. My name is Claire Falkvane. I'm the head of content for Inland Africa. Now, over the course of the past week, we've been exploring beyond the grid. Now, of course, this doesn't mean off the grid, but it is an acknowledgement that there's a lot happening in terms of the provision of energy that is outside of Eskom and grid-connected power. But today's conversation is going to expand that conversation of energy to include some of the other considerations that mines need to be taking when it comes to energy security. Now, yesterday we spoke with Christian Tefo from the Minerals Council of South Africa about the current landscape, and he gave us a fairly broad overview of some of the challenges that mines are experiencing. But of course, in addition to the challenge with power supply, there is of course that one big driver, which is the energy transition or the focus on net zero, which of course is front and center for so many of us at the moment. Now, the first step in any organization's transition to net zero is to evaluate and optimize your processes, or to implement new processes or efficiency measures in which you can reduce your electricity and energy demand. And that are some of the things that we're going to be touching on today. So it gives me really great pleasure to introduce you to Chanda Nxumalo, who is the CEO of Harmattan Consulting and the chairperson of SAPVIA, Rumisha Motilal, who is the commercial director mining for Gilbarco, and Jason Brewer, CEO of Marula Mining. Jason, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited about the direction that this conversation is going to take today. I think that we've got some really interesting topics that we're going to be touching on. But before we get into that, may I ask, Rumisha, perhaps you could start, just give us an idea of what it is that you do and what Gilbarco does as well.
Thank you so much, Claire. My name is Rumisha Motilal, and I am the Commercial Director for Mining for Middle East Africa for Gilbarco Veeder-Root. So Gilbarco Veeder-Root is the industry leader when it comes to digitalization and data analytics in the mining sector. We have historically evolved from offering fuel management systems to almost 60–70% of mines throughout African region, and we are transitioning into a data analytics partner for most mines. So as you know, the energy sector is evolving and we're evolving in our offering. So historically we were fuel management systems offerers, and now data analytics partner in the industry.
Thanks very much. Chanda, perhaps you could also give a bit of an introduction.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Chanda Nxumalo, and I'm the Managing Director at Harmattan Renewables. And we are a technical advisory firm that specializes in renewable energy. And so primarily solar PV, wind, battery storage, hybrid solutions. And we operate across the value chain from very early stage kind of feasibility works through construction, operations, and asset management, working on behalf of either owners, off-takers, or lenders. I also am the chair of the South African PV Association, and so I'll be wearing both hats today in the discussion. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks very much. And last but certainly not least, Jason.
Claire, thanks, and good afternoon. Jason Brewer here, and I'm the Managing Director of Marula Mining PLC. We're a London-listed company, although we're based here in Nairobi in East Africa. We are a battery metals focused company, and we're currently bringing in our first mine into production, a lithium mine in the Northern Cape in South Africa. So a lot of the discussions today are very relevant to what we're doing and planning for the future. In addition, we have a copper mine we're looking to develop in Tanzania, rare earths, niobium, tantalum, so all metals which are critical to these new industries. So, and all mines located in different jurisdictions, which require very different power solutions. So that's my role, and I'm very pleased to participate in this today.
Thanks very much. Chanda, we've obviously spoken quite extensively, I mean, not just yesterday and over the course of this week. It's not just obviously around solutions that are already being implemented. I mean, we're looking at what mines and I guess large industry generally are considering when it comes to technology and how they can secure their own energy futures. And I was wondering if you could perhaps expand on that a little bit, just in terms of what is available out there, and what are other options that could be considered, perhaps that aren't necessarily on everybody's radar at the moment.
So I think there's been quite a change over the past couple of years. Previously, a lot of the renewables solution providers were talking to mines and not getting very far. I think the understanding of a lot of companies was really that you needed to put in place diesel generation, particularly if you were off-grid or trying to provide some kind of energy security. And for various reasons, that's changed over the past couple of years. So more openness to looking at renewable energy solutions, so to looking at solar PV, to looking at potentially wind solutions as well, looking at battery storage and having a hybrid of those lower carbon type supply options alongside diesel solutions on your mine to go off grid. And so I think those are kind of the changes. The cost implications of some of those have had a bit of an impact. So most of the projects that we're seeing have been solar PV, but there is a move towards more wind solutions and the battery storage as costs come down. And interesting to hear Jason talking about the lithium mining. So as we get more local supply, I think the cost of battery storage solutions will also impact on the choices that mines have.
Yeah, I think obviously the more localization we can bring to this industry, and that's not necessarily just from a national perspective, but I think just from an African continent perspective, the more we're going to be seeing that's going to benefit us. But Rumisha, you are tackling this from a slightly different perspective when it comes to energy security. And I'd like very much if you could talk to us about what it is that you have been focusing on just recently.
Yeah, so we've seen that the big drive to reduce carbon emissions has transitioned mines into focusing more on what are their carbon emissions, how do they feature, and it's been a broader spectrum about getting financial investment overall. And we've seen that most mining organizations do not have their basic ESG dashboards available when carbon emissions are reduced, or like we in the fuel space, and we're also developing hydrogen refueling solutions. So we now have a hydrogen dispensing system available. And what we're noticing is the industry is asking for the requirements, but we're not seeing enough suppliers available with the solutions. We do not see mines having readily available visualized data to actually tell them what is the consumption as they're transitioning from diesel consumption to more energy friendly equipment. We're seeing that there's not a lot of data available for these decision makers to drive the key decisions. So what Gilbarco is doing is really advancing on ESG dashboards, data analytics to equip mines with data to make the right decisions. So when they decide on an e-mobility solution or a hydrogen-ready vehicle, they have the right data to back it up. As you know, hydrogen is really capital intensive, and there's a lot more considerations you need to take into consideration before making those decisions. So Gilbarco is supportive when it comes from a data analytics platform, so we can provide mines with the data to reduce or demonstrate their ESG and carbon emissions. And we're also working with them on hydrogen dispensing systems so that they can see which is fast, effective ways of them refueling. So now you know that Anglo American is currently testing a large vehicle on our continent, and we're testing hydrogen. We have the equipment to support hydrogen dispensing. And then there's further plant involvement where you can look at feeding back the energy into the system and generating your own power. So those are all the different variations we have. We currently have a full division set up to support hydrogen power and alternative renewable energy sources for the mining sector.
Thanks very much. Perhaps, Chanda, you could just, while we're having this conversation, and Jason, please excuse me if you do want to chip in terms of any of your thinking around these, please do so. But Chanda, in terms of the mining companies that are thinking about going this route, that are wanting to perhaps take a little bit more control of their own energy security, how do they determine the best solution based on their, I guess, unique circumstances?
Thanks, Claire. And I think the point that Rumisha raised about data is actually really important. And what we generally tend to find is that I think there is an ESG push and everybody's trying to decarbonize, but they don't actually necessarily know what that looks like or have a plan in place for how to achieve that. So I think first step that I would say is that as a mine, you need to understand what your current and future energy needs are. And so mapping that, creating a baseline, and then projecting over the next X number of years what your energy supply looks like, what your loads are, when your time of use is, and understanding that in the first instance. And then across the company, because again, it tends to be in different pockets. The procurement has one idea, the board has another idea, the people on the ground kind of running the operations have a third idea. So making sure that everybody's on the same page about what you're actually trying to achieve. So is it decarbonization, and is this purely about an ESG push, and are you striving for net zero? And then there's one type of solution that you're looking at. Is it reduction in costs of your energy supply? And that may look like something different. And then you've mentioned energy security, and I'm always a little bit loath to have the energy security discussion, especially if we're talking about renewables, because the reality is it's not necessarily an energy security play, right, depending on how you structure the project. So, but if that is what you're looking for, then try and understand that up front, so that when you're going out on a procurement process, you're actually asking for the right solutions. I'm sorry, I've got these new headphones and they're terrible, they keep falling out my ears. So I think understanding your load, understanding what you want, and then defining what your energy strategy is going to be. So that also looks at what your risk profile is as an organization. How do you want to procure the power? And I think an understanding of what is a power purchase agreement? What does that look like for your organization? How long are you willing to sign up for? And I think that was a lot of the, the initial fear from transitioning from a short-term, let's just get a unit that comes onto the site and we can send off that diesel engine, a couple of years later. Now you want me to sign up for a 20-year term for a PPA. So there's, and now there are solutions that are in between that you can look at for shorter terms and less risk. Are you willing to look at an EPC solution? So behind the meter, do you have land that you can construct something on? And then I think when you're looking at the best solution, just also being realistic about timelines. We have these discussions and we think that we're going to start a procurement process today, and then you're going to have power that's going to displace your carbon emissions in 6 months time. The reality is it takes a little bit longer than that. So realistic about timelines for delivery and what your expectations are, and then tenor of the solution that you're looking at. I think what Rumisha mentioned about data, getting that data in place, asking the right questions about where you're wanting to go to, and then following a defined path to agree on your energy strategy is what I'd say is how you can come to a good decision.
I couldn't agree more with you, Chanda. And what's really critical is that mines need to really evaluate, renewable hydrogen production costs versus diesel fuel costs. And so because it's capital intensive in the beginning, they all want to reduce carbon emissions and make the decision, but it's really about the stats behind it. So you have the renewable hydrogen cost on the top, that's very high right now. But when you look at the longevity all the way to 2050, and you look at the cost of diesel and where that's going to be versus the production cost of hydrogen at the moment, those are the key decisions that needs to be made, because hydrogen is like a highly capital intensive, extensive project, and you're lacking a lot of suppliers, you're lacking a lot of readily available solutions. So you need to look at the longevity of it using data. What's the cost now? Where's the diesel cost or the average diesel cost going to be? And how do we make informed decisions based on that from a financial perspective? So cost evaluation is quite critical too.
Yeah, and Rumisha, while we're on sort of evaluation, and I guess the role that data is able to play in some of these decisions, does the data that you are able to provide for some of the companies that you're working with indicate also, I guess, where the quickest gains may be, or the optimal place in which to make those investments, just by virtue of the kind of data that you're able to collect and visualize? Because I think that's also really important. Is, it's all very well to have the data, but you actually need to analyze it and put it into a workable, easily digestible format.
Absolutely. Data really transitions beyond ESG. It's really about overall productivity. So I've done a recent talk at Electra Mining that really unpacks digitalization and how we can improve productivity and drive results and value into mining. For instance, the mining sector can unleash almost 213 billion ZAR by 2026 if key mining decision makers and leaders focus on 7 digitalization strategies. And that is ESG, it goes up to productivity, it's renewable energies, it's so much that feeds into that. And you're going to see the downstream improvement. So what's critical is that we're getting all the data, but the data is either not captured, it's not stored, it's not accessible, it's not visualized, and of course, no decisions are being made from it. And that's one of the key failures we're having. So we can provide data to mines in terms of ESG dashboards, how much of fuel they've saved, what does this equate into reduction of carbon emissions, and we can provide dashboards thereof. What mines are having challenges with is they have all the data from multiple suppliers, but it's just not utilized, and they don't have the skilled workforce to interpret the data and integrate it into one. So that's some of the things we're experiencing. ESG, from an ESG perspective, if we do not have the impact monitored, you're going to have a lot of difficulties when it comes to compiling your investor profile. And this is where government comes into play, because in order for us to be attractive in terms of from a commodity perspective, we need to manage our carbon emissions, we need ESG profiles available, and that needs to be attractive to foreign investment. So this is something everyone has to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you should mention that whole foreign investment angle, because of course we are seeing more and more pressure coming from external and foreign investors in terms of making sure that what we are, that the way that we are producing goods, especially commodities, is being done in a, I guess, as sustainable a manner as possible. So that, of course, affects your investability long term as well.
It does. If you do not have your data visualized, I think just as a mining operator, you're definitely not optimizing everything that you can. We've seen that there's a lot of deployment in machine learning and AI and autonomous drills, and key decision makers focus on production, operation, supply chain. we've seen 61 to 71% key attention is being given to those type of POCs. But we're not seeing the same attention being given to data analytics and digitalization, which can help integrate the whole mine, all their data in. And of course, I think I did the last study from Accenture and World Economic Forum represented that approximately 158 million ZAR can be unleashed if decision makers focus on the right digital streams of data and make the right investment partners, bring on the right suppliers to help with that.
Of course, when you have all this data coming in, I mean, I know in the metering industry, for instance, they have spoken a lot about the data tsunami. So you have access to all of this information, but how do you determine what is actually relevant? Because also data that's relevant today may not be relevant tomorrow, and vice versa. So I guess that's really where you do need a team behind you or walking the path with you that can help you identify what is relevant to get the best out of your business.
You're absolutely right. And we're seeing that when you can visualize data, you can allow your key decision makers to look at where their production is headed. So you can have a mine operator that can eventually get all his data visualized according to his strategy and KPIs, pick up his phone in the morning and determine which OEM he wants to purchase for the next week. So what is the difference between OEM 1, OEM 2? What's the cost per ton ratio? Get that benchmark data and make key decisions. What's happened is all the data is everywhere, and you have various API links, but nobody consolidating that and aligning it to key ESG strategies and key operating strategies. And that's one of the failures we've had. We've seen, I'm not sure if you've looked at the data that I've shown, but from the 213 billion that can be unleashed, it's split into seven different categories, but 99 million is sitting in the frontline operations of data. So we get the data in, we have the intelligent data, but it's not visualized for decision makers to make key decisions. Then you have integration and security data, which is about 26 billion. And that's where the data is available, but not integrated to feed up. So you have each OEM that's holding the API data back and nothing's being integrated. And then you have obviously your advanced analytics that's built on top of it. And that's about 28 billion can be unleashed if you use advanced analytics with integrated data and with the frontline operations data all feeding up. In total, I think that can contribute to 2% to South Africa's GDP if all mining leaders can focus on a optimized digital strategy for ESG production and the rest. I see Jason's taking notes down. Jason, I can certainly say this related to this key.
Sorry, I did want to say, when you told me that we could see a 2% increase or benefit on GDP, I was just like, oh my word, this is definitely something that needs to be given perhaps a little bit more attention than it is at the moment. But Jason, I'm going to shift some of the focus onto you now. And I wanted to ask if you could tell us about Marula Mining. You've mentioned that there are a couple of areas and geographies that you're working in. What are the circumstances that you are specifically working to address?
Oh, look, Claire, just before that, I just want to say I wish I had Chanda and Rumisha sitting in my boardroom over the past month or two, because each of the things they've just discussed, we've butted heads, we've talked, we've debated, and God, I wish I had that data that Rumisha is talking about. Probably would have been data overload, because as I think she said, that, or as you said, that data tsunami, it's all well and good having the data, it's how you apply it, how you use it, and how you get the best out of it. And unfortunately, mining companies aren't best known for getting the best out of their assets, let's be honest. But with that in mind, Marula, I guess the most important asset I'd like to talk about is what we're doing there in the Northern Cape, because we face all the issues which are prevalent in South Africa at the moment in terms of power. And I'm sitting here in Nairobi, and I've got staff here in Nairobi, which we're getting excuses from some, not excuses are wrong, wrong word actually. We're getting suppliers in South Africa complaining that they can't communicate effectively because of all the power outages and so on, and they're scratching their head. Here in Nairobi, they're not used to that. We've got, I guess, Nairobi has a far more reliable power supply than even South Africa has, which would have been unheard of 5-10 years ago. So we find ourselves looking at our project in the Northern Cape and having to rethink how we are really going to be developing that going forward. And we're looking at it from two ways. Clearly that having the certainty of a long-term power supply to that mining operation. Okay, that's the mining operation which we've started developing now, and we expect to have our first sales in January. So South Africa will have a producer of lithium into the global markets, and that's being sold through a global commodity trader. So that's a great plus. But if you're producing a commodity such as lithium, you want to be a commodity which is critical to these green technologies and so on, electric vehicles. There's no point doing it if you're producing that via diesel-powered gensets or coal-fired power stations. You know, when we talk about ESG credentials, all the value we're getting out of being a lithium producer and so on just goes out the window. It really goes out the window because, again, our primary power source is either diesel or coal-fired power stations. It's not a long-term solution. So the circumstances we find ourselves, we're in the Northern Cape. We're north of Springbok, an area close to the Orange River there, the Namibian border. Great infrastructure which most other countries where we operate would die for, let's be honest. However, there's this uncertainty now of actually being able to operate effectively because of power. So we find ourselves now having to look at a solution, not just for the short term, but for the long term. We've got one of the largest lithium mineralization pegmatites in Southern Africa. So we have to get the best out of that. We're not looking for a 5-year or 10-year. This is a plus 20-year project, which potentially then opens up a lot of the battery metals downstream, upstream opportunities for South Africa. So we've got to look at it as to how best we can position it. If you go up to that area, I've lived in Australia for most of my life. I've experienced the sun. You go up there, I've never seen blue skies so blue. You've got more sunny days than Perth, which I think is a record. So the solar PV solutions is clearly one which we're looking at. We've had our camp upgraded, and we've had people on site doing mining and processing of old stockpiles over the past month. And some of the wind that we're experiencing is incredible, absolutely incredible. And all of a sudden, we're thinking, hang on a second, unless you're there on a regular, consistent basis, you wouldn't know this. So we're having to sit back now and consider how best to do this. Being connected, we've got the mains power goes across, just across the adjoining license area. So to get connected to the mains is not an issue. It's then a case of, will we have that main supply tomorrow? Will we have it for the full shift today? That's something which, if I was developing this project 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I wouldn't even have to have this conversation with you. We'd just assume, yes, not a problem. And we'd get a priority allocation, and we would be one of the biggest drawers of power in that region. Unfortunately, now as a mining company, we can't go down that route because it's been shown, it's been demonstrated quite consistently over a number of years now that that's not an option. So the circumstance that we are now facing is we need alternatives. We need alternatives which are also scalable. Rumisha's talked about a lot of the data which needs to be analyzed and how you get the best out of it. That's great for, I guess, a large major mining company, building a world-class asset. And there's many there in the Northern Cape and throughout South Africa. We're a junior company. We're an emerging producer. Our capital resources, again, we've got to allocate them to where we feel we get the best return, whether that's to an energy solution, a development. So all of these things play on our minds. But we need to identify and work now with suppliers to secure a scalable solution for our power needs. And again, that scene is moving so fast. It is moving so fast in terms of what can be supplied and what can't be supplied. You've seen companies, mid-tier companies, establish their own solar power setup, you know, which again, that wouldn't have worked several years ago. It works now.
Yeah.
With technologies, and we have to focus on that. So if we're going to be able to operate effectively and with all the cost advantages that go with it, we can't rely on fossil fuels in any way. We've got to look at the alternatives. And particularly so, like I say, just to come back to a closing comment, on the ESG side, all the credentials we build up, all that goodwill we build up as being one of South Africa's first suppliers of lithium into the global markets disappears when we've got our financiers turning around to us and say, okay, look, we've been through your ESG, your power's coming through Eskom, you've got all your diesel gensets on site. Guys, that's great. How are you offsetting this? How are you becoming net zero? So that decarbonisation thing, this is all influencing us at a time as well when we're securing our funding, our financing and support to basically not just build the current mine, but look at the expansion and growth of it down the track.
Of course, the challenge is that it's not just at this initial financing stage that the type of energy you're using could potentially be problematic. It's once you have produced your commodity in whatever form, with the introductions of things like the carbon border adjustment mechanism, you could be penalized again by the fact that your product now has got an added tax in that, you know, which then makes you uncompetitive. So it's, you know, it could be a double whammy for you, in addition to the fact that you're not quite sure where your power is going to come from to start with.
Absolutely. I mean, look, as well as the projects we've got in Southern Africa, we're looking at a number here. We have copper, graphite across the border here in Tanzania. We're looking at projects here in Kenya. Kenya is probably one of the best places to be operating in terms of power supply, with such a large proportion coming out of its geothermal, out of its wind. You know, I think it's one of the few countries in the world that has met the targets from the Paris Accord. So, you know, I would love to have a project here as advanced as what we've got in South Africa, because, you know, if I could bring Kenya's power to the Northern Cape, job done. But it doesn't quite work that way, and it's not quite that easy. So, you know, mines are where the deposits lie, and you can't get away from that. And that creates challenges. And here in East Africa, in Southern Africa, you know, we have a rare earths project in Northeast Zambia. And, you know, rare earths, given their critical role in magnets, wind turbines, and so on, I mean, that is something we really have to focus on, how we get the best out of that, given its remote location up there in the northeast of Zambia. A lot of thinking, a lot more thinking than I think most boards would be doing at this stage of a company's involvement. And there's enough challenges as you take a company from exploration through development and into production. Tremendous amount of challenges along the way. The whole challenge now from the ESG, from the power, is one so many more companies, and requires people such as Chanda and Rumisha and the various other suppliers of these alternative power solutions.
Sorry, Jason, I was wondering if you could share, do you have any plans in place in terms of the types of solutions you're looking for, or are you literally at that sort of exploration, we're open to any discussion, or do you at least have an idea of how you're going to do that spirit?
Sorry, Claire, no, with regards to it, up there, because I think there's something which works very well, given our location, given the vast area. I guess, look, it's a very vast, wide open area up there. So your ability to establish that on our license, which is gives us to do that license. The footprint that we have up there gives us the scope to do that. Out of that, that is the most advanced discussion.
Okay. Jason, your connection I think is a little bit glitchy, so we've turned your webcam off. So please don't be surprised or think that you've been disconnected. We're just trying to improve the connectivity here. So there have been a couple of questions that have come through, and if I could ask Rumisha and Chanda just to have a look and you know, give me some feedback on some of those. There were one or two that that have come through for you, Jason, and I'm going to sort of ask you this one that has come through, and it's: is your company's objective to manufacture even lithium-based batteries in Africa, or are you looking at mining to export?
I have already, which we're doing at the moment, prepaying from one of the global commodity, $7 billion global.
Jason, I'm really so sorry. I don't mean to talk over you, but we are really battling to hear you at the moment. I think if I may, I'm going to ask Rumisha to take one of the questions in the meantime, and I'll ask our technical team to see if they can't help Jason just with the quality of his signal. But Rumisha, while we are looking at some of the questions that are coming through here, one of the questions is, what or who would you suggest to get this data from, so that we can build up our case studies and better assist the mining or manufacturers, heavy users or off-takers on their decarbonization strategy?
Well, that's a very good question. So in terms of understanding where you're going from an ESG and a decarbonization strategy, I think you need to set your KPIs first. And organizations need to say, where are we going? So are we looking at reducing our carbon emissions by 20%? Or if you reduce your diesel usage by 20%, that's going to equate to that. So what you would need to do then is evaluate. I mean, it's a three-phase approach. You have frontline operations, you have your integration platform, and then you have your intelligence platform. Every mine has that. Two different scales, small, medium, and large, like Jason elaborated on. And what you need to do is then from frontline operations, you need to understand what data is available from each supplier and whether you can get access to that data via API channels or downloads, you name it. Once you get access to the data, you need to have an integration partner. Now I'm going to be biased here, but Gilbarco offers a joint enterprise decision intelligence app that allows you that. And once you integrate all that data, you can visualize it according to decided on upfront. And then you can have advanced data analytics to visualize your data. For instance, you can see by OEM, what's my cost per ton? Why does competitor A consume so much more fuel than competitor B? Does this tie in with what's in the warranty manuals? When you're making a decision on which OEM to select later on, you can look at predictive maintenance to say, okay, OEM A does this much drilling and then they need a service. So there's so much operational decisions that can be held and be taken based on the data you have. Mines can, for instance, look at route planning based on the data that's available. Gilbarco offers a lot of the fuel management data that tells you where your fleet is, tells you what's your cost per ton, your cost per vehicle. There's a lot of data that is fed into that. So to answer the question, it's really about who's your base suppliers that run your frontline operations, what data is available for you to integrate, which partner do you need to partner with to visualize your ESG data, your carbon emissions data, and obviously your operational KPIs, and align that to the strategy. And then apart from having the data, the biggest problem is the skill set. If you do not have the skill set to interpret the data, it's not going to help you. So you also need to look at where do you need to upskill existing in-house talent? Do you need to source a full-time employee that can look at digital production data? Can they do that? Can you evolve your full-time employees to become information expertise when they're interpreting the data? You also need to look at quality analysis. So when you get all the analytics, you know, can somebody in-house be upskilled to interpret the data, or do you need to source talent externally? From an AI and a machine learning perspective, you need to then look at, do you recruit talent or do they have facilities to upskill? But the biggest element for me is data analysis and visualization. We need mining leaders to be able to interpret the data we have. And we have companies that have in-house experts, but they're only able to give you that much of data. When you look at an external company, you know, that can offer various ranges of data, you can have benchmark data saying in the cold industry, this is what your fuel burn should be for this type of rig. For diamonds, gold, this is it. And with us, you know, we specialize in data analytics. We can give the benchmark data to operations to advance and improve. So again, to summarize, operational data, transitioning to integrating, and in closing, how do you get advanced analytics built on top of that? If anybody needs to know anything about Gilbarco's JEDI application, it's a mobile app that has all the data integrated and visualized. I'm happy to share that. That's one of the companies. But find a partner that you trust, that you can rely on, that can integrate the data and work with your key leaders. I have a mine in Mpumalanga, I hope I don't get stabbed for this, that has this data visualization application available, but the leadership team do not know how to interpret it and make the decisions based on it. So we keep saying, hey, you can reduce 20% if you do X, Y, Z and this. If you reroute your vehicles to do this, this is what we're seeing. And we keep harping on that. But when you have leaders that are not skilled to interpret and make those decisions, you're going to have those lost opportunities. And that's limiting our economy from growing and advancing. With all due respect, I'm not going to list which mine, but that's just an example that we can use.
But I think that we are seeing that in so many fields nowadays, is that what made up the skill set for a leader, CEO, a CFO, whatever it might be in a particular sector was fine even 5 years ago. But because of the amount of information we now have access to, the scope of the skills that they either need on their management team or that they need to build internally is almost developing at a rate it's really hard to keep up, because you can't be everything to everyone. So I guess again it's about making sure that you're partnering with somebody that is able to highlight where you are missing opportunities, to trust that partner to deliver on those opportunities. So one of the questions then that came up as a follow-up to what you were saying earlier, Rumisha, is that how are you estimating that 213 billion would sort of benefit the mining sector through the use of data? I guess I guess the person asking really, is that money that would come into it, or is it that you are by efficiencies you're freeing up some of that money?
Absolutely, a very good question. So there's 7 digital initiatives that can help South Africa's mining industry unlock the value. We have 153 million that's broken down into specific steps that mining organizations can adapt to. It doesn't give you an input in direct mine saving, but you'll see it will have increased output. You will have a reduction of production or personnel costs. You will have improved asset utilization, reduced downtime. You would have less health and safety incidents on the mine. When you reduce your overall fuel spend, that's a direct reduction in carbon emissions overall. that's going to be a positive for you. So you have all the value from these different actions and decisions that needs to be made that can quantify into the 213 billion that we can unleash. So for instance, like the specific organization that I spoke about, we've been telling them, okay, we keep seeing that the route is not being followed. And if you optimize your later, we have vehicle A, vehicle B, vehicle C refueling overall. And, you know, the fuel, the real time is not really good. So you can see there's specific guys that are refueling, taking the longer route compared to the good and the bad performers. So we can show them visually, these are your good performers that refuel using a planned route, and these are your bad performers that are not. That's saving you production time, you're rerouting your vehicle to fuel up faster, getting more output. And obviously, you know, it keeps the morale going. So we can do an analysis for you, tell you, this is the optimized route, this is the guys sticking to it, and these are the guys not. That's just one simple example. There's many other. You can look at the wheel types that you have and what would be the optimization if you change your wheel types. You can look at various things. If, you know, when the quality of fuel that comes through, we can tell you the impact that has on OEMs based on OEM data input, whether you're getting what's in the manual versus what's actually being burnt. So that kind of data helps that decision maker when he's arguing with an OEM, okay, you said I'm going to have a fuel burn of X, this is my fuel burn. I've looked at the benchmark across the industry, and that helps you with negotiating power. It also helps the OEMs use this data for R&D and optimize their vehicles and get better so that we can have a safer environment.
Absolutely fascinating. I think we could probably talk about the data element of this for forever. But what I did want to do, Chanda, is bring the conversation back to something that was discussed yesterday and is directly related to one of the questions that's come through. And it's that the Minerals Council of South Africa speaker yesterday said that they were looking at how best to advocate for localization of manufacturing of renewable energy components. And the question is really, how would you suggest as SAPVIA that the mines could help with that kind of advocacy?
Thanks, Claire. I think so. As SAPVIA, we do communicate and work with the Minerals Council quite closely. What we've done recently, and I think it was just launched last week actually, is launch a study into the localization potential the localization potential for solar PV, and that extends across the value chain. So normally what people look at is purely the modules and whether those can be manufactured or not, but there are a whole load of other different components, and looking at some of the mining suppliers, what can be manufactured in country. So there's one which is that, and then what we also do is work quite closely with DTIC. So under a lot of the REIPP, so the government procurement programs for renewable energy, there are specific local content designations for different technologies, and the goal of that is to promote local manufacturing capacity. So there's specific components that have a certain percentage that you have to supply locally and procure locally. And so SAPVIA is very happy to work with the mines individually or via the Minerals Council to and share the study so that we can look at a longer term strategy. I think it's one of those things that's going to require private sector, renewables, the minerals and mining sector, as well as government to work together with a long-term plan for it that hasn't necessarily been in place to date. But happy to, if anybody wants to reach out, then happy for you guys to either reach out to me or directly to the SAPVIA team and CEO.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that this kind of advocacy, this kind of step change is not going to happen in isolation. It has to be a joined up, initiative, and everybody has to be pulling in the same direction. Otherwise, it will just be lip service and not much more. Rumisha, one of the things that I did want to highlight, because I know that it is a very new and exciting, I guess, technology opportunity, is that of hydrogen. And I wanted to ask if you could just sort of talk us through some of the work that you've been doing from a hydrogen perspective, and what are the considerations that mines need to take into consideration, sorry, very badly worded sentence there, just in terms of implementation of hydrogen for their business?
So we're really at the early days. Can you hear me? Right, good, okay, good. We're really at the early days of hydrogen integration into the mining sector. We've seen that hydrogen has become the new buzzword, but the capital intensity around it does not allow, like Jason was saying, mines to transition that fast into a fully hydrogen-ready mine. What we're doing as Gilbarco, we used to offer fuel management systems that manage diesel to empower mines and improve production and get the best rate. That provided mines visualization and visibility of their fuel spend, which is about 30% the 30% highest cost spend or expense on most mines. What we're transitioning to do now as Gilbarco is we're getting hydrogen ready. As mines are testing hydrogen vehicles and evolving, we're getting hydrogen ready in terms of our hydrogen fuel dispensers. And we're getting ready to support renewable energy that we will transition with on different mines. I'm unable to disclose a lot, but I can share a few of the brochures that you have clear on our hydrogen dispensing system that we have. And it basically has an integrated payment terminal. It has a modern display. You can see that the dispenser is configured to dispense 35 MPa or up to 70 MPa when it comes to filling pressure. Early days again, from a dispensing perspective, we're on par. From a renewable energy perspective, we have a dedicated business unit that is assigned to renewable energy sources and supporting mines to visualize the data away from diesel usage to now hydrogen power and aid them to make the right decisions based on that data. So we're in full support. We really want to reduce the carbon footprint and create an environment for our kids and their kids to live in, and that's something we're working on. I'm unable to elaborate a bit more, but what I can tell you is the hydrogen dispensing system is readily available, and we've got a lot of R&D on the go. What I would encourage mines to do is partner with organizations that are hydrogen ready and those that are in the beginning phases and pilot it. I would say, if I had to estimate, we're about 2 years away from having our suppliers readily available to support most mines. But look at solar and wind power. Yes, it was all capital intensive in the beginning, but as you get enough R&D and you get wiser and a lot more inputs, you're able to develop solar, and we were able to develop wind and solar power at affordable rates. And similarly, hydrogen is going to follow the same suit. So I'd advise mines to really look at the hydrogen cost curve. So I'm happy to share the cost benefit of hydrogen investment, production costs versus the diesel usage over a period of time. And that can be a offset that they can use. Okay, this is what it's going to cost me to have a hydrogen ready plant. This is what the diesel spend would be. And do I want to make that decision? What's the life of my mine? Do I have 20 years in the forefront? Do you want to pay so much for a hydrogen ready solution, but your life of mine is 5 years? Then I would just look at playing with mobile vehicles, looking at hydrogen dispensing, visualizing the data, reducing your fuel spend. Those are the, so you have to look at the staggered approaches. I'm happy to share what we have again on dispensing but we're not ready to really disclose our R&D at this point.
Thanks very much. Perhaps after this, you and I can touch base in terms of how we can dispense that information, and then we can make it available to the attendees. Jason, I'm very pleased to see that the connectivity gods are smiling favorably on you. And we have sort of like 3 or 4 minutes left, and I guess I wanted to just ask, and perhaps given that we are unfortunately getting to a close, from your perspective as a mine, what would your most important takeaway be for people that are attending this session today, just in terms of either the things that are perhaps affecting you most intensely, or just considerations that you could then really need to bear in mind?
Look, I think the key takeaway for me and for some investors to bear in mind is that it's not just the major companies that are looking and exploring ways to optimize their operations through having a dedicated renewables power supply. This is something which all companies, junior, mid-tier, major companies alike, are looking and having to look at for a number of reasons. Where there is not the availability of power, where there are requirements from their financiers, their funders, their investors to secure a power supply which is better reflective of where society is going today. So this is not an Anglo story, an implant story, a Sibanye story. This is a story which all companies, Afritin over in Namibia with their tin mining operation, all companies, as they are now making that transition from an exploration development to an actual mining and producing company, all their boards, all their executive management are looking at ways to address shortages, availability of power, and securing power which meets investors' demands. Investors aren't, you know, I go to London, I go to the US, I go back to Australia. People that have got a coal mining company cannot secure long-term funding. That's a reality. That's a fact. You know, however, even a lithium company, a graphite company, has to demonstrate to its investors that its power supply is going to come, and they've given due consideration to ensure a net zero carbon footprint. That's the reality now. So it is going to become increasingly more prevalent on all companies to do this. But you know, as a more junior company, I guess they have the flexibility and ability to move forward without the machinations of several levels of management, where you know you just got to be more agile and you've got to adapt very quickly.
I don't know if those connectivity guards have decided that we need, well, I guess
we're just showing off about having electricity in Nairobi, so now he's got no Wi-Fi.
I know, and it was just such an interesting part of the conversation. I think what I would like to ask Rumisha, Chanda, if you could also just in sort of 60 seconds, what for you is the most important takeaway before we close off this afternoon? Chanda, perhaps you could start.
Okay, yes, happy to go first. I think probably just, and based on what Jason said and what Rumisha said as well, I think key for people embarking on this journey, stick to your core skill set, I think is what I would say. There are companies out there, renewable energy service providers, associations that can support you along the journey. You know, I think you can get that help as you go along. So if you're trying to embark on it, then ask questions, ask for external support to identify where you are along the journey, rather than trying to move yourself from being a miner to becoming a renewable energy solution provider. And yeah, I think take all the information that you can get from data service providers, from other companies, to move you along that value chain as quickly as possible, because I think, you know, over the next couple of years we are all going to need as much power as we can get. So yeah.
Start planning today. Rumisha, last thoughts from you?
Yeah, it's been very insightful. I think Jason's perspective around the capital intensive, challenges that mines have is really in the forefront. So you have the pressure for decarbonization, and you just have mines that do not have the facilities to take this forward, even though they would like to put their hands up. We need foreign investment to move ahead. What would be crucial is really about governments seeing this as a critical agenda point and aiding mines to develop more pilots so that we can have a renewable energy source. What I've also picked up is that if we do not understand renewable hydrogen production costs versus diesel fuel costs, you're not going to be sure if this is a business case you want to take forward. And thirdly, to close, data analytics is the way to go. Partner with somebody and start unleashing the small wins, because as you unleash a win, you start becoming a bit more attractive to shareholders, because you're reducing some kind of operational cost, you're showing some kind of efficiency, even if you start with one small bucket in your mine. Build the KPIs, get the data visualization and analytics to support that, and then you just grow your wins. Rome was not built in a day, so I would take a staggered approach with all my data suppliers.
Well, I guess that's why it's called an energy transition and not an energy revolution, is because it's meant to be taken step by step. Chanda, Rumisha, thank you so very, very much for your time today. Jason, I am not sure if you are online, but in your absence, thank you. Oh, you are there. Thank you so much. What I would like to suggest, Jason, is that perhaps you and I have a chat a little bit later. I would like to have the opportunity to unpack some more of your thoughts, but perhaps we can do it when there's not so much pressure on you in terms of being live. So, sorry, I think you're on mute. No? Okay, yeah, it's technology has definitely got it in for you today, I'm afraid. But let's see what we can do separately from this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the fun of doing things live, is that this is raw, and yeah, really, thank you to our speakers. I think it's been an incredibly insightful discussion. I think that there were a lot of issues that were raised that perhaps hadn't been on people's radars before, and now you have got a slightly expanded perspective on some of the things that you need to be thinking about. So from me and from Chanda, Rumisha, and Jason, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow's focus is all about storage, and we'll chat to you then. But from us, thank you so much, and please take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.